All right. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Serious Angler podcast, powered by our friends over at X2 Power Batteries. Joined here with the captain, Mr. Andy Full. And as always, I'm your host, Bailey Eichbrett. Andy, another day of guiding, another day out in the water. Are you surviving? Are you getting enough sleep?
Sleep, great question. No. We were talking offline, and I literally just woke up from a nap, which is probably going to screw me over tonight, but it was well needed. I'm sure you can see it through my glasses here. I got like triple bags going on, but waking up at like 3:30 every morning, getting the boat out, getting the rods on it, and getting in the water about 5:20 every day, and then fishing 8 to 10 hours a day lately. It's the grind is on. The post spawn funk, because I don't want to chase spawners, is an absolute grind from a week ago when Bailey caught his almost 7-pounder. And we went from catching like 40, 50 fish a day to maybe 25. So right now it's in a little bit of a funk, but we're catching them. Got 4 over 5 in the boat today. So it was a good day. Just had to work for them. So
yeah, I mean, dude, it's like one of the best times of year to fish, but also one of the hardest times of year to fish, because as anglers, I feel like we're so driven to be like beating the sun, but also staying out until it gets dark. And it is like the longest days of the year when it's light out at, it says sunrise is 5:30, but really sunrise is like 5:10, 5:15. You're like, we got to be on the water before that. And then the light is so good all day. You're like, I don't want to leave. So you're on the water for like 15 hours. And you're like, oh crap, we're going back out tomorrow.
Yeah.
I should get some sleep.
Yeah, and then throw 2 young kids in the equation makes it really fun, but that's neither here or there. But you know what? I am excited tomorrow to try, because I've been trying a different color almost every morning. I just got some siren in.
Ooh.
And they have them over at Omnia, the baby Z2s, and I'm going to go catch a smallmouth on this tomorrow.
Didn't you just tell me to not unleash that juice like 2 weeks ago, and now you unleashed the juice on everybody?
No, this is not the juice. This is just the one I bought to try it. But like, I've caught them on Morning Dawn this week. The other color, I think, is called the Juice, with a green. No, yeah, the Juice, and it's like a green pumpkin chartreuse belly. Caught them on that today, and tomorrow I'm going to try this one. So but I mean, dude, it's getting so clear that I can see the bottom in 38 foot of water right now on Erie, because there's no wind for like the 4th week in a row. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Well, dude, speaking of juice, we're going to be diving into some juice on today's episode. We have 2 special guests joining us today. We got Pete from Omnia Fishing that's going to be joining us here in a second. We got Jason Halfen from the Technological Angler, who I'm a big fan of because you know me, I'm a nerd when it comes to electronics. And I've learned a lot from Jason. I think the folks joining tonight and we'll be listening to the episode from at a later time, we'll learn a lot from. We're going to be talking about fishing electronics. We're going to be talking fishing, but pretty heavily on the electronics conversation. Jason's working with Omnia Fishing as well. And it's going to be some pretty good conversation tonight. So, folks, obviously, throughout the show, we encourage you guys to get your questions in. If you've got anything topics-wise you want to talk about, any tips on electronics or anything of that nature, fire them off in the comment section. We're going to try to get to everybody tonight. But I think without further ado, let's get them on here. We got Pete and Jason. What's going on, fellas?
What's up, guys?
Thanks for having us, guys.
Well, first things first, because you both are new to the show, we like to do this with everybody, is throw it all the way back to the beginning of how this addiction started. I mean, Pete, I didn't even know that you were from basically an hour where I grew up.
Yep.
News to us until offline here before we get on the show. We'll start with you, Pete, and the fact of tell us how you got started in fishing in the first place and who is to blame for this lifelong addiction.
It goes way back. Like you said, I had an uncle that took me fishing as a child, like for salmon fishing up in Oswego, which you guys are familiar with, and like walleye opener, that kind of stuff. But I really didn't get over the top till I moved to Minnesota. I had some friends that everybody in Minnesota, when I moved here, seemed to have a family cabin of some sort up in the north part of the country. And that was alien to me. And I went up there the first time with some friends, and we were trolling in their pontoon boat, and I trolled a rapala off the side of the boat and caught 2 walleyes. And I thought I was Al Linder at that moment in time, I just freaked out, thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So I got obsessed with fishing, started buying books and DVDs and all sorts of stuff and thinking I could go do this all the time. But I ended up, my wife actually signed me up, got me an application to work part-time at a Cabela's store that was opening up in Rogers, Minnesota here. And when I started working there, I learned real fast how little I knew about fishing. There was a whole bunch of hammers that worked there that are all big parts of the fishing industry now from all over the country. And there was this guy that was hanging out there all the time with us named Seth Fider that was just milling around the fishing department, and me and him became kind of fast buddies. And I traveled with him a little bit, started fishing a little bit, like Wednesday night or weekend night stuff and things like that. And I never looked back. I turned it into my career, and I started fishing from that point forward almost daily for a long, long time. And it turned into, I made it more my career instead of, being a tournament angler. I just wanted to always talk about and be around fishing. So
Seth Fider, I don't know who that is. You have to remind us now.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, he's pretty good. He's all right.
That's wicked cool. Jason, we got you?
I'm here now, yeah.
Heck yeah. Jason, pitching over the same thing to you that we were just talking to Pete about is when we're new to the show, new guests, we like to throw it back to the beginning, how you got started in this lifelong addiction. So explain to us how you got your start and who is to blame for this lifelong addiction that you've now blossomed into a great platform to teach people.
Well, I have to blame my dad, right? like many of us do, right? And so I'll say that I grew up in Chicago, but I'm much better now. Okay. I moved away from Chicago midway through college, and really got my feet wet in fishing when I moved to Minnesota, and had a bunch of buddies that all we did were fish and hunt and camp and canoe and things like that. And so if I wanted to hang out with those guys on the weekend, I had to come up to speed pretty fast. And luckily I had some really good teachers that taught me how to fish walleyes, fish smallmouth bass, fish big perch, fish big crappies and things like that. And so fast forward to my adulthood, I started guiding walleyes and smallmouth bass. I started fishing the FLW Walleye Tour and FLW Walleye League back when those things existed. And then was able to get connected with Johnson Outdoors through those activities, and have spent more and more of my time since then working very directly with Humminbird, Minn Kota, two premier brands in the marine electronics field. And now, we fast forward to the current day. Now I own and operate a business that's called the Technological Angler. It's really an angler education clearinghouse for Humminbird and Minn Kota products. And so we've been, for the past 12 years or so, offering training on Humminbird and Minn Kota products, traveling around the upper Midwest, doing full day training workshops where guys come in and they maybe don't even know how to push the power button or what happens after they push the power button. And by the time they leave us, they're ready. They're ready to really unleash the power of their electronics and go and find more fish faster and catch the biggest fish of their life.
Yeah. And I will say that for some folks, getting your first fish finder can be relatively overwhelming because it's this whole new platform that you're going to have to learn. And there's interesting in platforms in regards to resources and what's out there, what's good, what's not. I mean, that's the digital age we live in now, is sniffing through what is good info, what's bad info. And while we're going to get into a lot of it tonight, I highly encourage everybody to go to the links in the bio for Jason's platforms at Technological Angler and check a lot of that out, because you can learn a lot. And you dig into a lot of good avenues of using your fishing electronics and how you can apply it to catching more fish. So we're going to get into that. And I think the first thing what we're going to do, I got a couple things here, but I really encourage folks in the comments, start spitting out some questions, things you guys have questions on from your end when it comes to fishing electronics, how you should apply them to your fishing. But to start it out, and I'll pitch this to you, Jason, then Pete, if you want to follow up behind Jason, anything that you're thinking of as well, is someone gets their first fish finder. It's in the box. They're just opening it up and trying to rig it on their boat or their kayak. What are some of the first things that you are going to do once you power up that unit, whether it be settings, changes, etc.? What are the first things you're going to do?
Sure. So I'm going to even take a step back farther beyond, before we even power it up for the first time and talk about the transducer, right? When we look inside the box, everybody's captivated by this beautiful color display and, the resolution, the buttons and all that kind of stuff. But the most important piece of equipment inside that box is the transducer, because a poor transducer placement on the back of the boat, a lot of guys, they get excited, they just sort of screw that thing on the back of the boat and go, it'll be good enough, right? And it might work sort of okay when they're idling out of the harbor for the first time, but after that, the wheels come completely off the cart. And so my first recommendation is pay real close attention to those manufacturer instructions about how and where to mount the transducer. Because as I reflect back on 10 or 12 years of working in this area, the vast majority of problems that arise with new owners has to do with the transducer mount, the transducer placement, and then how power is provided to that unit. So once we get beyond those basic kind of rigging issues, and then turn the power on for the first time and start navigating around, I think that learning how to use the menu system is really important, because the menu system is where all of our settings are actually going to be housed and collected, right? And so it's not going to make any sense to try to change a side imaging setting, for example, when you're looking at the chart view. So it's important to understand where the different settings and things like that are located within the menu structure, and then spend a little bit of time before you even hit the water playing with that unit in simulator mode, because then, when you're sitting in your garage, like Pete is doing in his boat right now, right? You can sit there and kind of monkey around with things and learn how to go from side imaging to traditional 2D sonar to the chart view when you have nothing else on your mind. Because as soon as you get in the boat for the first time with that unit, you're going to want to rip to your spot and start fishing right away, right? Your focus is going to be on fishing, and rightly so. But let's spend a little bit of time before we ever cast the line to learn the fundamentals, the basics about how to use that unit, how to navigate the menu structure and things like that. So I guess after we get the rigging taken care of, invest a little bit of time in simulator mode when you're not distracted by the fish that are swimming beneath you. And that'll provide you with at least some sort of a foundation so you can be ready for success.
Total sidebar, but you guys in the Midwest, because your winters are 6 months long, do you sit there on simulator mode and pretend you're graphing?
That's what Florida's for.
It's even worse, right? We drill 10-inch holes in the ice and drop transducers below. We start looking around.
Oh, that's awesome. Anything to add on that, Pete?
Yeah, honestly, that's why I was so glad when you told me the topic tonight and that Jason was going to be on, because obviously he's a lot more educated when it comes to using his electronics than I am. And his exact scenario he talked about playing with it in your garage before you get on the water with the menu pages, that was probably the biggest thing that helped me with my last purchase, because twice in a row before that I did not do what he said, and I would get too down in the weeds trying to get settings where I thought I wanted them to be on my graph, and I ended up actually getting so deep into screwing things up that I was ending up restoring defaults and heading all the way back and having to fix everything back and kind of start over again. So I would just back up what he said on the fact that if I would have sat there in my garage and played with it in simulator mode for a while, I'd have seen how I wanted some things in different settings for my memory keys, learning, my presets, knowing exactly where I wanted things. I'd have been better off than just kind of jumping on the water and going fishing and starting to punch buttons and doing things before I even knew what the graph was capable of or how I actually wanted it long term.
Right, for sure. And with that, so let's progress a little bit further. So It's out of the box. You got it rigged correctly, right, Jason? And that is a great point that we've talked about, especially we work with Bass Fishing Electronics, and Steve talks about how the rigging, so many people overlook just the proper rigging, whether it's forward-facing, 3-in-1 transducer, whatever have you, that some people, the basic issues is their transducer is rigged wrong.
Yeah.
Like I've even had it to the point where a guy's asked me for help on his unit because the imaging won't show up. And he just didn't have the transducer plugged in. So like there's sometimes like goes like to your point, look at the manufacturers, the manual, like don't overlook. I know us as men sometimes like user guide, we don't
Footer
need that.
directions.
Yeah. But
Love it.
when it comes to as intuitive technology as we have today in fishing, it's definitely smart to do so. But when you get on the water, it's your first unit. Say you have a 3-in-1 that you have down imaging, 2D, side imaging, obviously mapping involved too. From an imaging standpoint, that could be a lot because you're like 2D and down imaging. It looks like the same picture, but they're obviously different. And then side imaging is completely different view of the lay of the land. If you could briefly walk through what those imagings tell you, but then also maybe run through from your personal preference of like a hierarchy of how you use the imagings to help you try to find fish, if that makes sense.
Sure. So, and so you're right. So first let's talk about traditional 2D sonar. That's where the game all started, right? Back with the Lowrance green box in the 1950s. And of course, technology has progressed substantially beyond them. The 2D, the highly refined 2D sonar pictures we have right now are substantially better than anything that was available even 10 years ago, with chirp and true chirp transducers being available so broadly right now. But traditional 2D sonar, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. What I use that for is my digital depth measurement and high speed searching for fish. So if I'm looking for, as I said, my expertise is really walleye fishing. So if I'm looking for suspended walleyes in the middle of the summer and I'm ripping down the lake at 25 miles an hour, I'm only going to be able to see fish with traditional 2D sonar. I'm not going to see anything with side imaging or down imaging. Those just don't have any functionality once we get over, say, 10 miles an hour or something like that. So my use currently of traditional 2D sonar, pretty limited. When we think about down imaging, of course, looks at a similar portion of the water column as traditional 2D sonar, but with a much higher sonar frequency. And one of the things we teach in all of our classes is that frequency, sonar frequency, is directly connected to resolution, right? And so as our frequencies increase, like traditional 2D sonar, you've got frequencies around 200 kilohertz. Down imaging, you have frequencies up to 1200 kilohertz, substantially higher frequency, substantially better resolution. And so when we go from 2D sonar to down imaging, even though we're looking at a very similar portion of the water column, the pictures we get with down imaging the images we get with down imaging have picture-like clarity, right? So there's no guesswork. When we look at some sonar returns in traditional 2D sonar, I call them blobograms, right? Because you kind of look at these lumps of color and maybe there's some shape and an arch here and some things sticking out over there. But without a lot of on the water experience interpreting that view, there's a lot of guesswork involved, right? Is that lump of color, is it a rock pile? Is it a little patch of weeds? Is it a group of minnows that are all real packed in really close together, right? It's a head scratcher. Mm-hmm. But when you look at that same area with down imaging, the mystery is solved, right? Because rocks look like rocks, trees look like trees, stumps look like stumps, weeds look like weeds, right? And so I use down imaging to solve mysteries that 2D sonar shows me. Okay. Now, my most important tool of all the tools I have in my boat, and I've got all the tools on my boat, my most important tool is high frequency side imaging. So Humminbird Mega side imaging, because with side imaging, of course, I'm looking off to the sides of the boat, maybe 100, 125 feet, something like that. It also, those side imaging beams kind of wrap beneath the boat. And so I get really an all-inclusive picture of what's going on everywhere beneath my boat, close to the boat, off to the sides, far away from the boat, off to the sides. I get that with picture-like clarity with side imaging. So again, there's no mysteries when I look at the side imaging view. I can see all the primary pieces of structure and I can see fish, right? And that's the most important thing to recognize, is that side imaging is not only a structure finding tool. It does that better than anything else does, right? But it is also the world's best tool for finding fish. And when I go to the lake, whether it's a lake that I fish 3 or 4 times a week or a lake that I've never fished on my entire life, the first thing I do is drive around and look for fish with side imaging.
I don't know what I would do, and I'm sure Andy would back this up too, without side imaging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Side imaging is everything. Like I've almost gotten to a point where when I'm guiding on Erie that I don't even use 2D and down imaging anymore. I just run my graph, like my side imaging, and then just my graph, like my waypoints and the lake. I can't even talk right now. I apologize, but I just use the two because I can tell what a fish is 40 foot down on my side imaging on Lake Erie, and there's no reason to run 2D and down imaging. But I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, Jason, but do you think if somebody doesn't have side imaging on their unit for a hummingbird, do you think it's imperative that they run 2D and down imaging together on the same screen with like the mapping, because it tells the whole picture of everything that's going on?
Yeah, at least it shows you what's going on there at the boat's position right beneath you. And so I do think because of down imaging's ability to give us those picture-like images, that it solves all the mysteries that 2D sonar presents, right? And so, yeah, in the absence of side imaging, having that knowledge, at least of that precise knowledge of what's going on beneath your boat, that's important. But if there are guys that are watching and have yet to join the side imaging club, it's time. Okay, it's really time. It was time. It was time 10 years ago, but it's really time now, because that is the most important tool that any of us have, whether we're a recreational angler, competitive angler, professional angler, all the way up to the elite series, right? That's the tool that they rely on the most for finding fish when they get to a new body of water, whether it's brand new to them or they just haven't fished it since yesterday. Hey, let's go fish, right? Because if all we do is fish memories and fish waypoints, we're missing substantially more fish than we're ever going to catch that day, right? Let's go around and drive around and find fish with side imaging.
Yep. I'd have to add to that too, to Jason's point there, that I've learned more about even my home lake. Like I fish Lake Minnetonka more than I fish most other lakes, just because it's so close and we use it for work stuff all the time, things like that. I was caught in that rut of always using my map to do just about everything when I had my big motor on. And then I was playing with all the new technologies, whatever was latest up on my trolling motor, and looking for fish that way. I've learned more about even my home body water, let alone when I go to a new body water down south or wherever in the country, leaving side imaging on all the time, dedicatedly on at my wheel. It is now a mainstay for me, because it can't be understated. I mean, obviously, like Jason pointed out, you can see fish on it, which is unbelievable. It's the best, sonar version looking for fish at the wheel, in my opinion, or when you're moving around covering water on the lake. But even it can't be glossed over. I mean, initially when we all got it at first, we were just probably weren't good enough at it to notice what was going on with the fish or knowing how to dial them in. It was all structure related. And that taught me a ton as an angler right there. I remember anglers like crazy telling me, go fish the rocks in this bay. And I would think, there isn't a rock in that whole entire bay. What is he talking about? and I would throw a deep crankbait for like days trying to find a deep, a rock. What this thing will do for you as a new angler on a new body of water, as far as side imaging goes, I agree. I think it's the number one tool, fish finding tool there is on the market today, is side imaging. I'm in agreement with the rest of the group there.
Yeah, and I think even aside from finding fish, it helps you just really understand like the lay of the land,
the bottom of the lake. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'll also even say that I call it the poor man's 360, where there's times where you can, be floating in, whether it's grass or wherever you're fishing, you just see some coming to the side, you're like, ooh, fire right off to the side, and you can catch them that way too. So yeah, I love calling it like that. But side imaging, I don't know if I could live without it. Like if I had to choose one, I think that's what I'd be rocking with the entire time. But going back to the question, Jason, like a hierarchy of like when you're out, you're going to go find fish. What's kind of your system?
So when I pull away from the dock, right, my side imaging is on, full screen side imaging, because I want to use all my real estate. Whatever display you have, you want to dedicate all your real estate to your side imaging view. once I find fish, right, and just so and just so all of your listeners know, right, fish and side imaging, we're looking for two things. We're looking for bright white spots and dark sonar shadows, right? And if we see any separation between the bright spot and the dark sonar shadow, then 100% of the time that's a fish, right? And so once I go and I find fish, then I can start thinking about pulling in some of the other tools as I get set up to fish on those, to fish to those fish. And so I'll go up to the trolling motor. I'll pull side imaging over the network, so I have access to the side imaging view up front when I'm looking for fish. And as I get towards that area where I see them, then I'm going to start thinking about some of the other tools, right? So 360, as you mentioned before, 360 imaging is a tool that gives us those picture-like images when we're not moving, right? Because of course, as soon as the boat stops, our side imaging view, everything just kind of streaks out, right? We lose all of that resolution, all that picture-like clarity. And so to get that picture-like clarity back, we need the transducer moving, right? And so we get that with the 360 imaging pod. We have that side imaging transducer, two elements of a side imaging transducer rotating around in a housing. That rotating transducer gives us access again to those picture-like images. And so when I'm spot locked off a rock point, right, and I want to know where the rock point is relative to my boat's position as I'm moving around in the wind or the waves or whatever, as that beam rotates around, right, every rotation I get two fresh looks at the structure and the fish that are hanging out there. That's going to allow me to put my cast in prime position every time instead of casting 20 or 30 yards off to the left or off to the right. And I think, when we pull up to a spot, we each have a mental image of what that spot looks like underwater, right? Based on having driven past it and with our side imaging view, now we've got a picture, and quite often that picture is incorrect, right? Mm-hmm. But 360, when we fire up the 360 view, now we're going to get that constantly refreshing look at the entire piece of structure. We can see how our boat is positioned relative to rock points, inside weed turns. We can see the fish, little pods of fish kind of moving around the structure and be able to place casts that way. And so, if our initial spot, if the initial identification of the spot of the fish is with side imaging, with 360, that allows me to stalk, right? I'm going to stalk in on those fish. I'm going to ease my way into casting position, knowing exactly where my boat is relative to the structure where the fish are localized on it, right? And so then when it comes time to cast, right, then we can fold in another tool, right, which would be forward-facing sonar, live and mega live imaging from Humminbird. And so I'm going to use live imaging when I'm actively fishing, right? I'm going to use side imaging to identify spots. I'm going to use 360 to help position my boat and help me with cast placement. Once I start casting, then I can fold in forward-facing sonar and see how those fish are reacting to my lure or not reacting, right? Because if I see fish there and they're clearly milling around still, and if they're not biting, well, that's a me problem, right? That's a problem I have to be able to solve by rooting around in my tackle box. And I'll tell you a quick story, because I was out all day today. I had to change my shirt because I still smelled like sunscreen from being outside all day. But I was on a lake where we had a tremendous bug hatch going on. So we had all these 2-inch long black caddises. I mean, I was just like covered with them at one point. They were crawling around and everything. And I was on a little offshore hump, and I was using Mega Live, and that offshore hump, 7 or 8 feet deep, was just covered with walleyes and smallmouth bass. I mean, the smallmouth were coming up and they were picking caddisflies off the surface. I mean, there's these big splashy rises, like, a 4-pound rainbow or something like that. and the bottom was just teeming with walleyes. Every once in a while, I snag one, right? Because okay, well, there's definitely walleyes down there. But I couldn't get them to bite. Okay. Well, clearly the fish were there. I could see them with 360. I could see them when I was casting, right? But that told me, hey, the fish are still here. They're super active. Let's start going through our progression and figure out what it's going to take to get them to open their mouths. And of course, what did I end up with? The Ned rig. I mean, the Ned rig solves all those kinds of problems, right? when they're on a little bug bite, find something that just, you know, is small and black and unobtrusive. Ned to the rescue, right? So that's the key. So the hierarchy: find our spots and fish with side imaging, position the boat, do the stalking with 360, and then use live forward-facing sonar as an active tool to help you with cast placement, see how the fish are responding to your lure.
Mm-hmm.
Pete, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'd say mine's very similar to Jason's, except in the last year or so, I've almost gone back to what Jason's saying now but I'd say in the last year or so, me and my friends found ourselves playing a lot more. We've always been 360 people. I think especially where we live in the Midwest, and I could definitely guarantee you where you guys are in New York there, 360 is probably one of the greatest tools. And I mean, if you're in a vegetation laden body of water, I mean, come on, there's no way to pick apart structure and vegetation around you better than 360. So that was always our argument against that, and playing with all the different perspective and landscape modes from the forward-facing transducer world. But I will say a lot of hardcore, anglers that are a lot better than me have been pushing me for the last year or two now to get more aggressive using that perspective mode and landscape mode and forward-facing sonars and hunt instead of breaking down structure that's behind you or around you or slowly picking it apart. Cook with get on your trolling motor and use that perspective mode, and you can identify some structure you can't see in 360, but you can see what's out in front of you, maybe off to the side a little bit, and look around and look for a structure that it's holding fish or whatever. So for the last year or so, I would say mine would be exactly like Jason said. I'd start with side imaging and my mapping, get a breakdown of the area I want to fish, then I'd jump on the trolling motor. But instead of using 360, I'd been hunting around with that perspective mode and live imaging, and then trying to catch them with the forward-facing sonar. Now, the reason why I say we're reverting a little bit is, one, I've sucked a lot this spring, but a lot of my friends, if we've got back into 360 having a real powerful deal with us, we're finding ourselves catching them a little better, teaming the two back up again, 360 and forward-facing sonar, because if found myself fishing for those fish I'm seeing on forward-facing sonar almost too much, casting directly to them, trying to get that fish to bite that I'm looking at on the forward-facing sonar, which it doesn't always work. We all know that have messed with it now. Actually fishing that cover that there might be relating to has been paying off a little bit more lately, up in my neck of the woods anyway. Kind of, identifying with the 360, like, what is this fish holding on? What are they swimming around here? There's a little bit of coontail off to my, this side of the boat over here. I've got a little gravel edge that's teaming off to a deeper drop off over here. And you kind of pitch around and fish the cover around you versus casting directly to these fish that I'm staring at over and over and over and over again. And we found ourselves actually doing a little better fishing the structure that we've identified around the active fish versus continue. I mean, it's obviously everybody gets it. If you see them on live sonar and you cast to it and catch them, that's the perfect scenario. But I don't know if it's the fish wising up or me getting worse at fishing or whatever, but it seems like I've been spending a lot more time chasing fish, staring at them on live sonar more than I should be fishing kind of the cover that's around and whatever the fish are relating to. The bite percentage has gone up more. So all the way back to copying Jason again, I would say side imaging, breaking down the structure around me with 360 and using forward-facing sonar to identify if there's fish present.
Remember, Pete, when you're not catching them, it's not your fault. The fish suck at eating.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Hey, before we move on, I just wanted to reiterate something that Pete said about landscape mode, right? So that perspective or landscape view that we get with forward-facing sonar, that is an incredibly valuable tool. Because with Humminbird Mega Live, that gives us 140 degrees, right? So we get, we get a big slice of that pie. And I've spent a lot of time this season working specifically with landscape mode for finding fish. And landscape mode, of course, gives you that 360-like perspective with one major advancement. It shows us the fish in real time, right? With 360, we have to wait for that beam to
Yeah.
rotate halfway around the circle to get a fresh look at the fish, right? And so we see 4 little white spots over here, and then we have to wait, 10 seconds, and then there's 4 little white spots. Where'd they go, right?
Mhm.
With perspective, we get that slice of the pie that we're most interested in, but we see the fish swimming around in real time, right?
Correct.
Are they swimming left to right? Are they swimming right to left? Are they swimming toward the boat? Are they swimming away from the boat? All that stuff allows us to be able to put casts in front of those fish in the direction that they're swimming, instead of hitting them in the tail as they're swimming off in the opposite direction.
For sure. And as you can imagine, a lot of the people that were telling me, ditch your 360 and get going on your trolling motor, go faster, look more, don't fish for fish that aren't there, all that stuff. Imagine a lot of the times, a lot of those anglers, it's pretty simple to kind of understand where they're coming from. They fish almost featureless bodies of water down south a lot of times. It might be in a reservoir where all you're looking for is life. You're not looking for anything the fish might be holding to or relating to. They're chasing bait. They're cooking. There's 7 bass every 1 square mile of the lake that are catchable, or whatever species they're chasing. So that's where that landscape came in for them. And I could see why I was being talked into stop slowing down and picking apart structure, run, and look for fish. What I've found is I've done a little better reverting back to kind of the way I was, and that's breaking down structure, holding fish versus just chasing down random swimming fish all over a body of water. It's just a better way. I'm not saying it's best for everybody, but for me personally as an angler, I'm more successful if I pick apart areas versus just getting on the trolling motor and burning battery to go find them.
Yeah, I like fishing. You found a system from your technology that's helping you better. Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. I got some more stuff, and I'm sure Andy does too. But before we do that, we got a bunch of questions right through the comments. So to start off, and this is one of the reasons, Jason, Pete, that I love Humminbird, is because you can get such intuitive technology on a smaller screen, meaning less money. And so this question pitching to you guys from Michael Bradley is, what's the best bang for your buck in an entry-level unit? Feel free to go ahead, Jason.
Well, when we teach our full day Humminbird workshops, this is a question that we get all the time. Guys who are thinking about, geez, I'm totally sold on the technology. Help me pick the right unit so I'm not like disappointed in my choice 6 months or a year out. And so what I tell everybody is that the current generation Helix 10 with side imaging, right? That's a unit that has a lot of value packed into that 10-inch screen, right? It does everything that a Helix 12 or a 15 would do, just with a smaller screen size. It's not going to be outdated, 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. There's still going to be a lot of life in that unit. If a person can't afford a Helix 10, then I would say anything bigger than a Helix 7 is going to give you enough real estate on that screen to be able to get a good, high, reasonable resolution side imaging picture, and still have enough space so that you start using your split screen views, right? You got side imaging on one half and chart on the other side. Then you still have enough real estate to be able to see both of those things reasonably well. Yeah.
From my experience with Omnia and in retail, and obviously my stuff before this, and mind you, I have no electronics affiliation, guys watching this at all. I got friends that work at Humminbird with Price and the whole crew over there, and I got friends at Garmin and Lowrance, and I can run anything I want. I have zero affiliation. I will flat out say in front of all of them, they have heard me say this plenty of nights at ICAST and all that. I do think, I know I sound like a broken record here copying Jason and everything, but I have on my boat right here, I could try and show you there, a Helix 10 at my wheel. One of my graphs at the wheel is a Helix 10. And I have it for a reason. It always works. I've had a couple of them now. It always works, and it's super easy. And I'm not super technical at my wheel. I use side imaging, back to what we were talking about before. I use side imaging in my maps at my wheel, and that's about it. And I try and get up on my trolling motor as much as I can. That's just the way I fish. I think if you're getting into this and you can find yourself, like you said, with a 7 to a 10-inch Helix, try and get as big as your pocketbook will afford, just because of the fact that you can do a lot more with them. It makes you more efficient. I do believe that. I'm not just saying that because it's more expensive. But I think that's a sweet spot for me. I try and not buy the most expensive, stupid stuff I can get my hands on. But I am into some fancy stuff, but I think for bang for your buck, it's really hard to beat between all three of the manufacturers of Helix 10, in my opinion. Most of our customers that are new to this game really end up being happy with that purchase.
Yeah. I mean, you made a great point there, though. Like, buy the biggest screen you can within your means.
Yeah.
Because at least with Helix units from Humminbird, then the technology you get, the G4 now is like you can get them in smaller units, but the bigger the screen, the more you're going to be able to see.
Yeah.
Correct, Jason?
For sure.
For sure. And the simple fact is none of our eyes are getting younger. Right. And remember this, that the most important detail on the side imaging view are the smallest things. Those fish.
That's true too.
Right. And it's the smallest thing on the whole screen.
That's true.
And so if we have a larger screen with more pixels, it's going to be easier for us to see those smallest details. And if what we're trying to use these tools for is for finding fish, then give yourself all the advantages that you need to be able to see fish as well as you can. And so it's the larger screen that you and your checkbook can wrap your hands around. That's where we want to start. And for a lot of people, kind of that gateway drug, if you will, is a Helix 10, right? Yeah. And once they've got a Helix 10, then they go, well, clearly I need to step up to a 12 the next time I go or something like that, right? But go ahead and do what you can, stretch and get that 10. That's a unit that you'll probably have that'll probably last 10 years. It'll still be on your boat, right? And even if you end up with a larger unit downstream and you put that at the console, you're going to take that 10, you're going to move it up to the bow, or you're going to have it sit off to the side as a secondary unit. I have lots of customers that I've worked with in the past that still have that original unit parked off to the side. Maybe it's just doing their charts right now, but it's super reliable. And as Pete said, they just flat out work and keep running.
Yeah. Andy, I'm sure, and I'm Jason obviously guiding as well, and when you're out guided and you're going just to refine fish on your Helixes, you probably get that question a lot too, at least just in general about graphs. Mm-hmm. So this is probably one that you're listening to getting these questions every day.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoy like when I'm out just on endless flats in the Great Lakes. I'm like, that's a pile of fish, and they're like, no way. And I'm like, throw a waypoint on, spin around, like cast over there 45 feet off the right, and they hook one instantly. And they're like, I can't believe it. Like it looks like the tiniest little piece of grain of sand, and like there's 7 of them, and you catch 5, and you're like, okay, let's go find the next ones. It's so cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
And that is one thing too, especially for folks that are low on the learning curve at the moment or getting into getting a fish finder, is it could be overwhelming seeing all the different detail. It definitely takes time to understand what you're looking at. So give yourself and Jason, I love your opinion on this. It's a repetition thing. The more time you spend looking at them, the more you're going to understand what you're seeing on your screen.
Yeah, for sure. And only so much of that can come from simulator mode in your garage, right? You're gonna have
what you're talking about.
You're gonna have to actually go out in the lake that you're fishing and carve out a little bit of time to do some on the water learning, right? And so what I tell people that I work with all the time is that there's always going to be that 45 minutes or an hour in the middle of the day when you've got to eat your lunch, rehydrate, the sun's too high, the fish aren't biting anyway, right? So let's go around and invest that hour or however much time it is in learning something about your fish finder, right? Go ahead and get on a spot where you saw some fish before and take another look at it. Go drive past it in a different direction, right? Look at that bottom, look at the bottom, the fish returns, whatever, without thinking about, I got to grab a rod and get a bait over there, right? Instead, sort of reinvest that time and that effort in learning how your fish finder operates. How maybe it's just learning how to make a couple of quick adjustments so that those fish returns pop off the screen better, right? Play with your sensitivity and contrast, and all of a sudden you find, if I set my sensitivity to this and my contrast to this, when I'm over soft bottom, man, those fish really leap off the screen. It's so much easier for me to see them. That's some learning, some on the water learning that can help you catch fish for years into the future just by investing a little bit of time while you're like wolfing down your sandwich and guzzling some water so you can, be ready when the fish start biting again in a couple hours.
Yeah. Worst case scenario, you find stuff that nobody else in the lake knows about.
Right.
Just real quick, I do have a hot tip for everyone. Make sure you take it off simulator mode before you get to the lake.
Oh yeah.
Because you're going to be like, man, I'm seeing all these fish, but I can't get them to bite. And, you're going to have a world of a mess. But yeah.
I can promise you customer service has gotten those calls before. Yeah.
They're in 1 foot of water. It says 10. What is it? Yeah. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So we have another question here, and this is a great one. Another one that I think is overlooked by many when it comes to the performance of your electronics. From Jason Ray, he's talking about what impact does battery voltage have on our ability to dial in the clarity of forward facing, but not just forward facing. Let's just talk electronics in general.
You get muddy on that.
Well, all the electronics that we use right now are absolutely bloodthirsty for power. Right. I mean, when we encounter problems at, in our workshops or with customers or things like that, we can almost universally trace non-rigging problems to power. Right. And so maybe that angler has the same crappy Group 24 lead acid battery that their boat dealer put in to try to bring the price down and make the whole package more palatable for them. They've been running that for 5 years, and now they're trying to start their boat, run 3 graphs, a network. They've got some, high-end tool like 360 or Mega Live or something, and they're wondering why things are dropping out or they get crappy returns or something. It's like, well, let's start with giving you an actual battery there instead of whatever that excuse for a battery that you have in the back. So yeah, so power is critical, right? And so there's really 2 schools of thought with customers that we work with. One school of thought would be if you want to stay with your traditional battery technology, a Group 31 AGM battery as a house battery goes a long way. It would absolutely run all your electronics, even in the most amped up boat for easily a day, if not more, right? More and more people are going to lithium as their power source. And actually, that's a change I was resisting until this year. So this year I finally went and switched over to lithiums. Now I've got a lithium house battery, and that has cleared up a lot of the noise interference that I was working with on the boat I have this year. I flip boats every year, and so every year is kind of a new adventure for me with graphs and motor and everything, and trying to get it all rigged up the right way. And so this year I finally broke down and said, well, I think I can actually solve these problems with a lithium house battery. And I went and bought a 100 amp hour, lithium house battery. Works like a champ. I wish I would have done it 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And this is a conversation. Obviously, we work with XT Power that we love talking about.
Yeah,
is enough? What is enough power? But then what is the power that you need to have your stuff running at a high performing level, not just for a couple hours, but for all day, if not multiple days on end? Especially if you're going to spend amount of money on an $80,000 bass boat and multiple units and forward facing sonar, you might as well spend the amount to have a quality battery to make sure that those are running top notch.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And if guys are wondering what I have a 100 amp hour lithium house battery, right? So that runs, I have 2 Apex 13s. I've got a, Mega 360 and a Mega Live. And all my networking components, all of that run on that battery. And lithium's beautiful because the power is very consistent, right? You don't have significant voltage drops during the day. I can run all day on that one battery, and when I get home and plug it in, the battery charges in like an hour and a half. It's just like boop, and it's ready to go, right? And so if I was on one of those super long trips, put in an 8 or 10 hour day, and I wanted to go out and fish for 3-4 hours in the evening or something, I could come back to the dock, plug it in after a nice long dinner, boom, that battery's back up to 95%, and I got more than enough juice for everything to work exactly the way I wanted from that battery.
For sure. Anything to add on that, Pete?
Well, I'll be the one to get into the drama on it, I guess. We're seeing a lot of, a lot of chatter from our consumers asking because, in the crappie fishing world, which I didn't believe it till I went and saw it, and I've been involved in it now a year or two to see how much further advanced they were electronics wise. And a lot of the bass and walleye circuits and those pros I was dealing with, those guys are insane. They're running, insane amount of electronics and stuff. And the rumors were a lot of the premier, forward-facing sonar guys were running dedicated batteries directly to their forward-facing sonar and overpowering their graphs. I do know some of them personally now. I've got to work with some of them, and there is some of that they claim a 15-inch unit with running 20 volts of juice up to that, to that thing will make the picture better. I will tell you, every manufacturer I've spoke to has said that's a bad idea. Don't do that. Stay away. So, if you got all the money in the world to throw at it, I guess it's something to try, but don't expect to get too much love back from the manufacturer and the warranty side of things doing that. I will say I do, I've seen a couple people now. I've been in a boat or two. I didn't notice as big a difference enough to justify doing something like that, to overjuice I thought that's where he was going with that question. I'm seeing a lot of tournament anglers ask, hey, I think I'm going to run a bunch of power up to 110 to 15-inch unit up on the bow and just juice up my forward-facing sonar unit and see if I can get a better picture out of it. As of right now, I haven't seen the difference myself. I wouldn't recommend doing it. I would say wait until there's some more solid answers or more better solutions than that before
someone else does it.
Yeah. Unless, like I said, if you don't mind blowing stuff up, just try not to return that thing. I don't want to do it. Yeah.
We have a great question here to follow up on this, because we've been talking about 360 tonight, Jason. And he says he still hasn't figured this out. With Mega 360, do you subtract depth on the water column from distance an object is away?
Yeah, so the range, the total range value, the total distance value is a combination of the lateral distance, right, the distance away from the transducer, and the depth, right? And so if you think about it like a triangle, you've got the horizontal leg of the triangle, that's our distance over, and then the vertical leg of the triangle, that's our depth. Well, I better go this way, right? So the hypotenuse, the angled leg of the triangle, that's what the actual range measurement is, right? It's that composite of distance and depth. In relatively shallow water, okay, I'm talking about 10 feet or less, something like that. When you get that range measurement from the angled leg of the triangle, it's virtually the same as just that straight lateral distance. So in relatively shallow water, the difference is nothing to worry about, right? As we get deeper and deeper, you're out fishing rocks for smallmouth in the middle of the summer, and you're 20 or 30 feet in 20 or 30 feet of water. Right now, that actual range measurement will be more significantly influenced by the water's depth, but it's not going to be just as simple as subtracting away the water's depth and getting a true range measurement. That's gonna tend to underestimate the true distance away from that object. And so what I tell people is when you measure the range with 360, right, that object is no farther away from the boat than that range measurement. And the deeper the water is, the closer that object actually is to the boat relative to the range measurement. And short of like breaking out the slide rule, when you should be out there trying to figure out how to catch the fish, right, don't make it any more complicated than that. In shallow water, think about the actual distance away being reflected reasonably well by the range measurement. And then as you get to deeper and deeper water, then that object starts really being closer and closer to the boat. So certainly you can cast to what that range measurement is, but you're casting beyond the object. And somewhere between where the bait lands and the boat is where that object truly is.
Yeah, that is the perfect answer to it, because I've been asked this a few times before, having run 360. And thankfully we have you on here, Jason, that can answer it intelligently, because I just be like, just cast really far in that direction and you'll run into it. That's about all I can say.
I had nothing on that one.
Realistically, you should always be casting past the fish anyways and bringing it back to them. So it works.
Right.
Yeah, just cast really far in that direction. You'll get into it eventually.
As long as it's not in simulator mode.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's, to Pete's point, running 360 and live in tandem now, like you can use both. I mean, the 360 is like, rock this way, pan live, and then you're making a more accurate cast because you have it on live.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that nice tandem that you were talking about earlier. Interesting question here from David Jong. We're going to wrap this thing up here in a little bit, but talking about 2D, I think he's talking about not on the console, but maybe more when you're up on the trolling motor. Has forward-facing sonar somewhat made 2D sonar almost irrelevant for those that have the tech? What do you guys think? A little juicy topic here.
Well, I would say that, one of the real-time fishing applications for 2D sonar would be like fishing a drop shot and trying to keep that drop shot rig in the 2D beam so you could see the weight and the lure and the fish that are interacting with it, right? That, or in a walleye world, it might be vertical jigging, right? Same sort of concept where you're trying to keep the lure in the beam and see what's going on within that sonar cone. Keeping the lure in the beam is much, much easier as soon as you get more than a rod length away from the boat. Much easier with forward-facing sonar than it is with traditional, cone-shaped beam 2D sonar coming down from the nose cone of that transducer, right? I mean, just wind and waves and current, it gets to be a significant challenge to keep that lure inside that cone-shaped beam. But with forward-facing sonar, it's easy because all we need to do is just pan the beam over. Oh, there's my lure right there. It's much easier for me to sort of see what's going on in that application. So I don't know if forward-facing sonar has made 2D irrelevant for those kind of applications, but it's certainly made the presentation much, much, much easier because that beam is steerable, either by hand if you've got a universal unit, or like a lot of guys have it on their trolling motor shaft, right? It's just so easy to turn that beam. Oh, there's my lure. There's a fish right behind it. Boom.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Yeah, I'm not going to use 2D too much anymore. To Jason's point, we were still using it fishing like a drop shot over suspended fish and like down south, like Table Rock stuff, like when a tree's down 100 foot below the boat, like 60 feet down. But there's some stuff we started selling at Omnia called bait pop. You rub it on your line and stuff. And so even like a little crappie jig glows on your forward-facing sonar. So bit by bit, it just keeps chopping away at the 2D's relevancy to me as an angler. I know there's Jason alluded to it earlier, running down a lake and actually looking as you're running. Maybe that's still where I see having some value to me as an angler. But forward-facing, slowly but surely is burying it in the backyard.
Well, now we're seeing guys graphing with forward-facing sonar transducers on like their jack plate.
Oh yeah.
That's a whole rabbit hole for a whole show. We talked about that with Steve from Bass Fishing Electronics on here. Yeah. That is like a whole makes your mind go nuts thinking about that. But,
yeah, I had dinner with some guys down in Missouri that were showing me some videos and stuff they're doing. Once again, they're throwing some power at some units that it shouldn't. Being able to graph at 60 mile an hour with those things, and it was pretty insane. Now they haven't dialed any of that in yet, but it's all coming. I mean, we all know it's coming. It's just a matter of time and how much money you want to spend.
Yeah, that is for sure. But Andy, you got anything for Jason and Pete here, or should we hit him with the last question?
So Jason, I do have a question for you when it comes to settings, right? So I find myself, as the sun gets higher through the sky throughout the day, I constantly have to adjust the contrast and my sensitivity on my side scan just to make the bottom pop more or less based on the light conditions. Do you see that as something that you have to do relatively often, or is there just like a general base setting that you have that makes it work really well? And can I add one more thing on real fast? I apologize. What is for Sidescan, like what would be the number one palette option you would tell somebody who is new to using Sidescan to use for the first time to help them see the best overall clear picture?
Sure. So I'll start there. And what I tell all of our training workshop trainees is that all the colors are good as long as they're blue.
I like it.
The blue in my mind is the best. And I think it's because the blue color palette, and we're talking about the Humminbird blue color palette here.
Yeah.
it has the greatest ability to get brighter and darker and be visible within the broadest range of sensitivity and contrast values. And when and in comparison, I say when we look at something like the amber color palette, the number 2 or number 3, which is the bright orange one, those color palettes are so bright that it's almost hard to dial them down enough to start not just like blasting out all the smallest features on that side imaging view. So I like blue the best. Okay. I will say that when it's bright sunlight, I do every once in a while switch over to amber, which is number 2, just because it is so bright and it can kind of offset the super bright, high skies or something like that. Be a little bit easier to see in full sun high skies. In terms of, I guess I haven't noticed, Andy, your observation that during the day my sensitivity and contrast values change in some sort of predictable way. And maybe that's because I'm always working on those things every time I come off pad, and I'm trying to dial in my image for whatever piece of local bottom composition I happen to be fishing around, right? So with soft bottom, I'm always going to have higher sensitivity. And with mega imaging, that might be, 12 to 16, right? I really want to crank up that sensitivity because sensitivity makes everything on the screen brighter. When you're over soft bottom, the bottom is real dark, right? And so if I want to see features on the bottom, I need to make the bottom brighter. So I'm going to do that by raising my sensitivity. My contrast values, right? Contrast, if I increase contrast, that's going to accentuate my shadows. And so a really important time to increase contrast and accentuate shadows is when you're looking for fish over hard bottom. So think about what hard bottom looks like. Hard bottom's real bright, right? And so if we're looking for fish, it can be hard to see that bright white spot for the fish against the bright white background of the hard bottom. And so increasing contrast is going to make the shadows from those fish pop, right? And so if it looks like somebody has sprinkled poppy seeds all over my, white hard bottom return, well, those poppy seeds are the dark sonar shadows from all the fish. I can't see the bright white spots because they're bright white against a bright white background. So they're almost invisible, but dialing up my contrast makes the shadows pop better. And so those are the 2 things I think about, right? I want to change my sensitivity based on bottom composition. High sensitivity for soft bottom, lower sensitivity for hard bottom. And in contrast, increase my contrast to make the shadows pop. And then there's also a time when you want to decrease contrast. We want to decrease contrast to get more range, right? So with mega imaging, for example, that really high frequency side imaging beam, if we want to try to stretch that out 120, 150 feet, something like that, the only way to start seeing signals on the fringes of that long range is by lowering our contrast. That will brighten up the fringes for me.
Really fast on that, Jason. What would be a reason for someone to go up to 120 or 150 from a range standpoint on side imaging?
Well, the only reason would be that they want to get a look at something and not have to like turn the boat around and drive close to that object and get it at a shorter range. I almost never go beyond 100 feet for my side imaging range. And usually I'm actually a little shorter than that. Usually I'm in that kind of 80 to 100 feet because that I want to take the data that I have in my casting range and expand it over as many horizontal pixels as possible. And so 80 to 100 feet is my sweet spot. If you really want to reach out to 150 feet, right, you can with mega, but actually it's better with 455. If you go back to old school 455, that's going to give you the longer range. That's going to allow you to see more readily at 130 to 150, something like that.
Makes sense. Awesome. And you got anything else?
No, thank you. That's great info. I appreciate it.
Yeah, cool.
Folks are loving it. But again, this is your guys' first time on the show, so we're going to send you off with the question we got to ask everybody that comes on the show. And Pete, we'll start with you.
Gotcha.
And what we do is if you could invite 3 different individuals to have a steak and a beer and pick their brain. Okay, and so we'll pitch this to you as well, Jason. We'll lay out the question here. They could be alive 1,000 years ago, could be alive now. Doesn't matter. Doesn't have to be fishing. What 3 individuals would you invite for a steak and a beer?
Steak and a beer, talking fishing.
Talk anything you want.
Okay.
It could be sports. It could be anybody.
Yeah. I guess I've got to fish them a few times, but I still enjoy listening to his stories more than anybody. So I'd say Al Linder. I would say, my Uncle John, who got me into fishing. I'd like him to be there with me and Al Linder there having a steak and a beer. And I would also say, I guess since I've met him a couple of times, he's never even responded to the questions I've asked him and stuff, is probably Jason Christie. I think it'd be interesting to talk to him too. I do want to mention before we go, Jason partnered with us on some of this stuff at Omnia that Brad and the team was telling me this as I was walking out the door today. I was going to a weigh and my friends are having a tournament, and they said, we have a really killer giveaway going on right now at Omnia. It's on the homepage tile on the homepage right now if you go look at it, with a Apex 13 Aquaview unit and a rod. I believe Jason got that thrown in for us. So go check out that giveaway on our homepage at Omnia Fishing right now too.
Heck yeah. Well, for folks, we'll put that in the show descriptions as well, so that way it's super easy for you guys to go get in on that. Heck yeah. And really fast before we get to Jason's 3, there are some pretty cool sales that I saw that's going on in Omnia Fishing right now.
Oh, yeah.
Arc hard baits. I think it's Zoom horny toads.
Yep.
They're like 25% off. So always running some pretty wicked sales.
Yeah. If you're not familiar with the Arc hard baits either, I just got some myself recently, and they have Japanese hooks on them, and I know the brand. I don't think they want anybody to know yet, but they're nasty, nasty hooks. They're the best stock hooks I've ever seen on a crankbait in my life, and they have like tungsten transfer weights in them, so they cast a mile. So if you're not, I was not familiar with Arc crankbaits, so they sent them to us. So any of you that are hard bait nuts and want to try some cool hard baits, check out some of those Arc ones. I bet you like them.
Did you guys get the jerk baits in? I haven't had a chance to look yet.
I haven't touched the jerk bait yet. Just the trap. They're lipless. They're square bill. They have like a coffin bill, and then the popper. The popper is one of the best casting topwater lures I've ever thrown in my life. It's got a tungsten transfer weight in it. I mean, it knocks. And you can just sail it like super fun. I've been throwing it under docks. Like you can sail the thing. It's like throwing a 1/2 ounce jig. It's pretty wild.
Cool.
They're cool baits. I've just been messing with them the last few days here. Haven't even blasted them on it yet. I'm just, for any bait junkies out there, you want to try something cool. If you're a hard bait person, check out some of those Arc baits. It's a good time with them on sales.
Heck yeah. Yeah, you guys can go check that out over at Omnia Fishing. But Jason, what's your 3, my man?
Well, I feel bad because I'm going to borrow one of Pete's, right? So I grew up watching Al and Ron Linder on TV. About 15 years ago, I was working for Rapala, and the first time that Al Linder came into one of our product development meetings, I was like a little girl, right? I was just like starstruck. Oh my gosh, it's Al Linder.
Yeah.
Right. And subsequently, I've had a chance to fish with them several times. We shot a TV show. I've worked with Linder Media on a bunch of projects over the years. I'd love to be able to spend another hour just, chewing the fat with Al for sure. And I look forward to seeing him actually here in a couple of weeks. I'll be speaking at the St. Croix Rod Customer Appreciation Day. Al will be there. St. Croix is providing the Legend Tournament Bass spinning rod that's part of the Omnia giveaway. And so I want to give those guys a little shout out too. And so I'll see Al then. I'd love to get Al together with my dad, the reason I got involved in this as well. And then one of my primary fishing buddies, whose name is Bob Thorpe. Bob and I are both hockey guys, and so Bob is actually the assistant coach for our local college team, D3 Hockey Club. They're NCAA champions from 10 years ago. Bob and I love to fish and play hockey and coach hockey, and so I'd love to get all 3 of those guys together to talk hockey and fishing.
So, because you're a Wisco guy, and I know it's a happy mix of Wild and Blackhawks fan, but which way do you sway?
Well, so I grew up in Chicago, right? And so I used to go to old Chicago Stadium, right? When the dust would fall from the ceiling when the national anthem was being played on the organ. In recent years, yeah, I've spent a lot of time watching the Wild. Really love going to those games. There's a lot of the Chicago Stadium hockey feel that goes on in a Wild game, so I really like that. But right now, currently, I'm a Wild fan.
Yeah, I don't blame you with how Chicago's. But hey, congrats on Connor Bedard coming to Chicago.
Yeah, right. Maybe he'll turn it around for him. We'll see.
Yeah, Jason, we'll have to get together and have some beers to talk hockey because that is one of my, besides fishing, is one of my lifelong passions. So we'll save that because people on this episode are like, guys, fishing or hockey again, really? Come on. It's like football season. We talk about football for like the first 10 minutes. But for real, thank you both for taking the time to join us tonight. This was an awesome conversation. I know the folks appreciate it, dropping some knowledge on them. And guys, we'll be talking real soon. Again, for folks that give away all the links to Jason's social media, as well as Pete's social media, Omnia Fishing, all that jazz is down below. Whether you're on YouTube or on MP3, go check all that out. You can definitely learn a lot and take advantage of some wicked cool stuff over at Omnia Fishing. But boys, appreciate it, and hopefully get you guys on real soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Look forward to it. Appreciate it.
Take care, Jason.
Bye, guys.
See you. That was wicked cool from an education standpoint. The comments, guys, that was awesome for you guys coming in here, and hopefully we got to as many questions as we could. Appreciate you guys coming in and hopping in on that, and hopefully you guys got to learn something, gain some extra knowledge from that. But Andy, there's one question here that is making me laugh, so I didn't want to waste their time while they're on here. We're trying to let them go. But Michael Bradley for the top 3, a steak and a beer. He goes, no one ever picks a woman. Think of all the extra steak and beer.
Facts.
Hey, it all depends. If you get my fiance in that, there ain't no steak left. You have all the beer, but the steak will be gone.
Yeah, it's funny. That's a really, really good comment. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Picks on the cup. I'm going anti-Vegas on this one because I'm a Penguins fan, so I really have no bias. But Fleury went to Vegas and they got rid of him fast, so I'm salty about that. But also, too, I just don't want to see Jack Eichel win a cup. I'm sorry.
Yeah, same. But it's like, I mean, who's going to win the cup first? Sam Reinhart or Jack Eichel? I kind of hope it's Sam Reinhart because
Reinhart left on good terms.
Yeah, so
I'm not a Sabres fan, but I grew up when I was a kid. I was forced into Sabres fandom. But I just don't like the way that Eichel left the whole thing, and
it's I'm actually rooting for Florida. I saw a hilarious statistic though. Since 1993, I believe there has been 7 teams from Florida that have made the Stanley Cup final, and only 7 teams from Canada. So Florida teams have made it 7 times since 1993, and there's 5 Canadian teams, I think, right? Is it 5 that have made it 7 times since 1993? Yeah, 5.
I'm trying to think.
Vancouver, Edmonton,
more
Calgary.
Montreal.
Yeah. Oh, Winnipeg, it's 6 now. I always forget about Winnipeg, but
I don't think Winnipeg's made the cup.
No, they have not. But I think it's just Montreal, Vancouver.
I don't think Calgary. No, Calgary did.
Calgary,
it was 05, I think.
Jerome McGillna,
Aginla, come on.
Aginla, whatever.
William Stench Ever says Florida rules hockey. I have to veto that. Hard veto. I went to a Tampa Bay Lightning game against the Sabres, and there were more Sabres fans there than Lightning. And the Lightning fans that were there was maybe 10% of them that were actually invested in the game. The other ones were partying in the suites. I'll give it to them. The arena was sick, but I'm sorry, but I'm even from New York where hockey's big here. Minnesota rules everything hockey, not pro level, I think
from a high school level, it's insane. They can fill pro hockey arenas for high school semifinals. It's wild.
Yeah, the Florida. D&D Steve says the Florida teams are Canadian teams. Yes, Florida teams are Canada and Russia.
Yeah. No, I think they actually came from who I don't remember what teams they came from, but yeah. No, man, that's brutal. Like the Sabres, Sabres are so good through my childhood until like 2011, and then they just.
The Sabres were really good back then. Before it was the year Drury and Briere left. That is when Sabres tanked.
Dude, my
next year might be the best year.
Like 1996, 1997, 98, 99, when Dominic Hasek would literally take like 47 shots and let one goal in a game, and it was just unreal. If the Sabres had any offense during the time of Dominic Hasek's like prime, they probably would have won multiple cups because they had Shatan who would score 70 goals a game, 70 goals a year, then everyone else would have maybe 18 goals or 15 or 10. It was pretty brutal.
I will say, I think next year, when you look at the team chemistry from this past year and then just from the simple roster and additions, I think next year is going to be the best year the Sabres have had since they lost Briere and Drury.
Well, here's a fun fact, right? The Penguins, sorry, I'm going to rub it in here, didn't lose to Columbus. Florida would not be in the Stanley Cup Finals. And if the Sabres beat Florida with 3 games left in the year, the Sabres would have been in the playoffs as opposed to Florida. But the Sabres
they wouldn't have lasted
by 1 point. You don't know. They beat Boston, I believe, twice in the regular season. They could have beat Boston.
And then they got smoked the other times.
No, they only lost by 1 goal and I think 2 goals.
I'm pretty sure it was like 7-2.
You'll
have to fact check. Regardless, I don't think the Sabres would have went all the way.
No. But you never know. All you have to do is get in the playoffs, and if you're the hot team like the Panthers, where you can go on an insane run. It happens.
Florida had really good moments this past year. Somebody was in an interview, and I agree with them that when I watched Florida, they would have spurts where it's like, holy crap, if this team fires on all cylinders, they're scary. But then they'd have like games where it's just like, what fell apart here? It was just weird. But like, I mean, dude, Bobrovsky, they have one of the best goaltenders in the league. People forgot about him after he left Columbus, but like, he is unreal, and he's standing on his head in the playoffs right now. And 2, I mean, I am a big Montour fan. I was mad at Buffalo that they let him go because, I mean, Montour, I think, is one of the big missing pieces that if Buffalo still had him, if they could afford him, like, that would have been huge for Buffalo's defense because their offense is fine right now. They solved goaltending as long as the kid can still play well next year, but defense is the biggest gap.
Yeah, we have 3 top-tier defensemen, and then the rest are like 7th, 8th at best. So that's going to be the Sabres' probably off-season goal is to upgrade at least 1 or 2 defensemen. I don't even think we have any like high-end prospects anywhere. Oh, wait, we just signed Ryan Johnson from Minnesota, finally. The final piece of the Ryan O'Reilly deal, who will probably make the Sabres, I think, next year as like a 5-6 defenseman. So that should help. And yes, Paul Kariya was insane. The one highlight I remember of Paul Kariya was getting lit up by Scott Stevens and coming back.
Everybody knows that one.
Like 3 goals. I remember watching that game.
Yeah, like if it was TV, today's age, he would have never came back in that game.
He was done.
It was a different age back then when men were men.
I don't care what anyone says. Playoff hockey still today, I feel like they don't like call concussion protocol. They just let them play. Because if you've been watching the playoffs, like men have legit died like 6 or 7 times in some of these games, and they just keep playing. Like playoff hockey is like nothing else.
If you get knocked out nowadays, that's probably the only way that you're getting out for the game. But you're back in 2 days.
You're back in 2 days.
You're back in 2 days.
You're seeing cross-eyed, a little dizzy, and got some black spots, floaters. You're good.
Dude, I was there for the game. I was like 10 rows up when Brian Campbell lit up Umberger at home. That was the coolest arena setting I've ever been in. How loud that place was against the Flyers because the whole Sabres-Flyers rivalry.
Yeah.
And he lit up Umberger. Still the coolest thing I've ever seen. And then he's back in 2 games.
The craziest part about that hit was like that was the instant rise of Brian Campbell, and then he priced himself out of Buffalo in like 2 years and ended up going to the Blackhawks, and he had a very good career but he was not worth the amount of money that he signed in Chicago.
Yeah, he won a cup.
He did win a cup, so good for him.
No, he won 2 cups. 2 cups. Back to back.
But I feel like any defenseman on that team went with Kane and Taves in their prime is just like insane.
they just
Brian
they had a
Bickle.
perfect roster.
Yeah.
I mean, that was back like that. The years the Chicago won was probably the last couple of years where enforcers were like a thing. Now, like you have maybe 3 enforcers, like known enforcers in the league. That's it. Like that's all you got. Fourth liners are even still insanely skilled today. It's all just now in between the ears. Like, because everybody's skills are. There's very few guys, in my opinion, that really stand out from. Obviously your McDavids, your Sidney Crosbys, your you could even argue Ovechkin still to this day, Draisaitl. Like there's guys that stand out visibly from a talent standpoint, where now it's just between the ears. It's just grit and then just decision making. I mean, it's kind of same as fishing, but we are going on a wild hockey tangent right now.
Okay.
But for folks circling back here, fishing wise, if you guys want to take advantage of some of the sick deals going on Omnia Fishing, head over there. And you guys remember, we have a discount code. If you've never ordered with our code before, take advantage of our code called Serious First. No spaces, all caps, just Serious First. That is FIRST, not like the one ST. Serious First. It's down in the description below. Get 15% off. It's a one-time use. And then after that, you can use Series 10 for 10% off, unlimited amount of times. As many times as you want to use it. And I will say, too, guys, Omnia Fishing is also a great resource for if you're fishing whether you're tournament fishing or not, but you're scouting out a lake you'd like to go to, a lake you've never been to. There's fishing reports for one, the people that have been actually out there fishing
water
and catching them.
for premium members.
And that's what I was going to get to right there.
Sorry.
That tool, no, you're good. That tool is legit. You can pull up a lake and when we had Trevor Lowe on, he said when you could see the temperatures, those aren't always correct. Look at the color palettes where you can tell which part of the lake is warmer than the rest. And you use that as a gauge to kind of like a starting spot, get ahead of the curve when you launch the boat or kayak or going to fish that. So super cool. But Anthony Geist still wants to keep talking hockey. I could talk hockey all day and night.
Yeah.
It's been a while. The only thing I think this is good for the Panthers if they do win is maybe they'll actually have some good attendance games next year. But like the games have been popping in the playoffs. Like they had fans there.
That's
I'm
South
like, where do
Florida
these people
for
come
you.
from? Like
they'll show up like if the Tampa Bay, like look at the Tampa Bay Rays, right? Like best team in baseball. If you watch a TV game of the MLB right now and the home games in Tampa, there's all of 8 people in the stands. But as soon as the playoffs come around, everyone is a Tampa Bay Rays fan. So it's like a weird Florida thing. And I don't know why the Lightning get big crowds, but like the Jacksonville Jaguars last year got on a run at the end of the year and they still had like thousands of seats like empty. The Miami Dolphins, same thing. Like one of the biggest names in the NFL. And they struggle to fill seats in the stands. It's like LA. Miami's like LA of the East. Like people don't go to sporting events like you think they would in a major city until it's playoff time.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tampa 1 is just a great location for a big sports team, especially one that's a consistent one in regards to schedule. And they did an incredible job from setting up the arena outside to be like a Florida setting where it's almost like a party. And you got the nightlife down there where it's a great segue from like, say, a Vegas where people can go watch a game and go right downtown. And they did a great job with the arena. It's modern. It looks great. So I think there's that, but like you can tell, like if you understand hockey and you go watch a game in Tampa, granted I only seen one, you can tell a lot of people are there for the fun and the scenery and like the atmosphere versus the hockey. Because a lot of people just aren't even paying attention. They're literally standing up in the stands, talking and mingling with each other with Tampa Bay jerseys on, not even watching the game, just drinking. So it's like, you're like, okay, you're not even here for the game. You don't even know what's going on. And, but I think it's a great location. That's why I like the Miami Heat do so well. Because, I mean, when you're in Miami, I mean, what's the cool thing? I mean, nightlife is there. You're like, let's go see a Heat game. Big NBA stars. that sort of thing, where like no one really cares about hockey in Florida very much. You know what I'm saying? The Florida Panthers aren't going to get a big draw. The Dolphins one does kind of surprise me a little bit, to be honest. But I also think maybe people just don't want to go sit outside in that stadium. You know
That's
what I mean?
fair. I would not want to go to a game there in September. You're going to die of dehydration and heat stroke. So,
Well, especially trying to tailgate that, dude. You know how many
Oh.
people that probably like in bad condition? I mean, EMS is probably on full throttle. That so
I
love
am
games.
sure.
I love the game in Buffalo that we went to. I love that for the pure standpoint of like it was cold as hell, and I love the cold, and it was fun. You can drink beer and have fun all day and not worry about having a heat stroke. And if anything, it warms you up when you're cold, so you're good. But we have a question here. Talking on the hockey thing, is Kane going to stay with the Rangers? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say he's gone. They went all in this year on a cup and failed miserably.
You know, it's going to be crazy, but I can honestly see him coming to Buffalo. I don't want Patty Kane, but I can see that being a move they make just because it's his hometown. And I believe like 10 or 11 years ago, he said he would want to play for the Sabres at some point in his career. So I can see that happening, especially with the team on the rise.
I just don't know, man.
Where else is he going to go? New Jersey? He's not going to go to New Jersey. He likes big market teams. You know, Patrick Kane's going to end up out west, and he's probably going to go to LA, and he's going to disappear the rest of his career. And then in 2 years, he'll be traded to Pittsburgh because they love to trade for old men like Jeff Carter and be a salary cup.
Jeff Carter was like, hey, we can't win faceoffs if Sid is not taking the faceoff. We need somebody to take faceoffs. So it's like, hey, Jeff, take a faceoff, get off the ice.
Yeah, but that's like that's the issue with the Penguins right now is you're literally in salary cap hell with all these old contracts that your team is going to be struggling the next few years.
We're doing just fine. I mean, the team just can't freaking figure it out right now. We're struggling on defense. And offense is firing.
And old. Your team is old.
You got two guys that are old. Well, three. Letang. But Letang needs to stop having seizures. I think he should stop playing hockey right now.
Blood clots and strokes and seizures, yeah.
He needs to not play anymore. And he sucks now. No offense to Letang. He can score, but he can't play defense anymore. If you want to score, go on offense. And yeah, I don't know. Penguins, I don't think you'll see in contention for a while. And it's going to be a sad, sad day when Crosby retires. But also, I feel like if he's the guy, if he stays healthy, he's going to play till he's freaking 50 because he doesn't do anything else but play hockey.
Yeah. Just like Ovechkin's probably going to play till he's like 40.
He's got full head of gray hair.
Yeah.
He probably still shotguns beers before he goes and steps out on the ice.
Yeah.
He's like a damn spirit animal.
I do believe Ovechkin is going to break Gretzky's goal record. He's getting close, and I
think he's going to stay till he does it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think he could do it next year if he stays healthy.
And for Jim Lopez, I believe Buffalo is drafting 15th. They were like the first or second team out of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Literally missed it by 1 point. And it's because they went on 2 9-game losing streaks with a team that's average age besides Craig Anderson and Kyle Opozo is like 21 and a half. Like the Sabres are going to be fine.
They have a good future until all of them at the same time say, pay me more.
Yeah, but that's the deal. They're already starting to pay them. And they're all on severely cheap discounted contracts. Like Cousins got
until they realize, oh crap, these kids.
Well, that's the thing with the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement in the NHL, is that whatever contract you sign, you're stuck with it. And if you show up, you basically get penalized and don't get any money at all. And there's no repercussions. Yeah, they have to play out their full contract until the final year, and then they can renegotiate in the final year. That's the NHL CBA. Yeah. So
very interesting.
Yeah. Because I think Tage Thompson's deal is 7 years or 8 years at $7.5 million. Talk about a bargain for a 50 goal scorer.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. So.
Well, buddy, as much as I would love to sit here and talk hockey all night, I could really do that.
Yeah.
I need some more.
I need to get up at 3:30 in the morning, so I need to get that.
Let's sign off here. But folks, appreciate you guys. If you're listening on MP3, we haven't mentioned it in a while, but if you guys could if you're able to in the platform that you're listening to. We see Ovechkin needs 72 to tag. Okay, he's not going to do that next year.
Yeah, he's getting in 2 years. He'll have that.
2 years. 2 years.
Yeah.
If you guys can leave us a rating and review, helps us out big time. Helps us get seen more, which in turn helps you guys more because we can invest more into the show. But appreciate all of you guys. Fun show tonight. Thank you again to Pete and Jason for joining us. Heck of a lot of fun, and we'll see y'all on the next one.